Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to ICommunicate, Finding Your Voice on this beautiful Thursday afternoon. My special guest today is former NBA center James Donaldson, who played for 15 seasons, 5 different teams, and wrapped up his career on the Harlem Globetrotters, no less. So, James, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Mark, thank you so much, you and your audience, and just a pleasure to be here.
So, James, before we get into anything important today, I just got to make sure with the World Series going on, are you? I need to know who you're rooting for.
Well, typically, I'm not a big baseball fan, but typically I check in around the third and fourth game of the World Series. So I'll start watching starting the next game, and but I don't have a dog in this fight, really. I'm just watching it for the sake of watching good baseball.
Fair enough. That sounds fine. So James, I want to just talk about, get into your playing career a little bit. And, it was funny. I remember you playing an integral role in the Mavericks teams in the 80s. And, I was looking back in the 87-88 finals, and that was the closest you got, I believe, to winning a championship. And I guess I want to ask, a lot of times in sports, we talk about preparation and mindset before games. And you hear, James, a lot of times people talk about when a team gets blown out, that they're going to be angry the next game, or they're going to play harder, or if it's a game 7, you're going to bring a different mentality. Are those fallacies? Do you come to the same mindset each game, or is it different?
No, you have to find that level of consistency because there's going to be games you win, there's going to be a lot of games you lose, and you've got to be able to approach the next coming up game with a clear head, a clear focus, and you can't let emotions get the best of you, because that's when things really start going awry, which kind of lends into a lot of the stuff we'll be talking about, Mark. Competitive athletes, we learn to put on this game face. We learn to put on this tough exterior when inside, we're just like everybody else. And so when those playing days are over and it's time to reach out for some help with other folks in your life, a lot of the guys have difficulty doing that. So this is one of the things that I'm embarking upon. But to answer your question, you've got to really stay consistent, approach each game just as it is another game. And if you got blew out the night before, you got to forget about that. And if you won by 30 or 40 points the night before, you got to forget about that. And here's a new game and a new challenge right in front of you.
So, James, I want to talk about, I want to build on what you just said. So, during your playing career, you played with a couple of guys, Marcus Johnson and Roy Tarpley, who had addiction and dependency issues. And, as you grew up in your background, was that your earliest exposure to being around people, or did you deal with some of that growing up in school and with your family, or any of that background?
I wasn't really aware of a lot of that. That's never been my particular choice of lifestyle, to engage in any kind of substance abuses or anything, whether it's drugs or alcohol. I think the first time I noticed that, guys did indulge in different kind of things was when I was at Washington State University. We had great players. There were always guys who were a little bit troubled, who needed different vices to get them through, or at least they thought they did. And they resorted to those vices, and many times very detrimental to their careers. And you mentioned Marcus Johnson, Roy Tarpley. Another wonderful player and teammate of mine I had through the years was David Thompson. The Skywalker from North Carolina State. David Thompson. He was one of the nicest guys in the world. Would give you the shirt off his back, and he just fell prey to so many people leeching onto him, wanting things from him. He engaged in a lot of the alcohol and drug problems as well. And it's really sad to see, because typically the 3 guys we mentioned are 3 of the nicest guys you've ever want to meet. Marcus, Roy, who unfortunately passed away in 2015, and David Thompson are 3 of the nicest guys, nicest teammates I've ever been around.
So, James, things are really evolving and changing. You look at the word stigma, and in mental health, it's such a powerful word. And, in the last year or so, we've seen Kevin Love and DeMar DeRozan come out and advocate for themselves. And recently, we just saw Everson Griffin of the Vikings. So how are we improving, James? I mean, is that the beginning to real progress, or in your mind, we're not even close. We have a long way to go.
Well, I think it's the beginning of something. I think bringing awareness to the fact that other folks have gone through something like this is definitely beneficial to society as a whole. But, you know, I've got a whole list of celebrity athletes and entertainers, probably dozens and dozens of them, who have gone through one type of mental issue after another. Unfortunately, I don't know a lot of times if the general public can really relate to these folks and these lifestyles that they've lived. I'm trying to be as real as possible with my situation and just let folks know that, yes, once upon a time I was a great NBA player, but here we are 20 years after the fact, and now I'm a middle-aged man going into retirement soon, and I had my whole world turned upside down. Nothing because of what I did. I didn't drink. I didn't smoke. I didn't do drugs. It was personal relationships. It was business finances. It was IRS situation. It was my health. All these things accumulated at the same time that really caused my world to go upside down. So that's what I think the average public, Joe public, can really identify with. Not so much, living a high lifestyle, spending thousands of dollars a month or a week on drugs and alcohol. No, most people don't do that. But most people will have something in their life that goes totally upside down beyond their control.
So James, I want to read something from one of your blogs or one of your posts that really was what compelled me to reach out to you. I want our audience to hear this because it really speaks to your character and your goals and mission, how you're trying to help others. So it says, men need not to suffer in silence or drown our sorrows in alcohol, hang out at bars or strip joints, or get involved with drug use. Having gone through a recent bout of depression and suicidal thoughts myself, I realize now that I can make a huge difference in the lives of so many by sharing your story. So I want to understand, James, it had to have taken you a lot of courage because, again, it's still not really out there. So what was that decision like to come out and share that story? I mean, yes, you wanted to help people, but were you just sitting there one day and said, I need to do this? Or share with us what that process was like.
Well, the beginning of me entering into that very dark and terrible place was last Thanksgiving, 2017. All of a sudden, I couldn't sleep through the night, 4 or 5 nights of not being able to sleep, of waking up at 1:30, 2 in the morning. My mind is racing 100 miles an hour, and I have two options. One is to keep on trying to get through what I'm going through, business closures, financial problems, personal relationships, or the other is to just check out, exit, and end my own life, which was a real possibility as well. It scared me. It really scared me. I reached out to my doctor. I thought he was just going to prescribe a simple sleeping pill for me to help me sleep through the night. Once he heard what I had been through, he said, James, wait a minute, you have got some big issues you're dealing with. Anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts and tendencies. These are things we have to get under control. And he, even though I'm not a big prescription medication advocate, he prescribed some prescription medications, antidepressant, anti-anxiety, and I never really felt that they worked. I took them because he wanted me to take them. I'm still taking them. It wasn't like I had a drastic change of emotions or a drastic change of outlook on life. I wasn't jumping buildings in a single bound all of a sudden with all this newfound energy. Nothing changed.
Right.
But I still take the medication because he prescribes it. And so, but that really was the beginning of me entering into that dark place. There were days, Mark, I really did not think I was going to make it to Christmas Day, from Thanksgiving to Christmas Day. It was so bleak. It was so dark. I was going not day by day, but hour by hour. If I can just make it through this next hour, if I can just try to get a good night's sleep. And then in mid-January, a student athlete at my alma mater, Washington State University, Tyler Helinski, took his own life.
Oh,
And he was just nominated, just given the nod to be the starting quarterback for this year's WSU football team.
wow.
He was on a family vacation 5 days prior to this incident. The family said he looked totally fine. He acted totally fine. He went back to WSU, Washington State University, took a gun, unbeknownst to a friend of his, stole a gun from one of his friends, and shot himself in his apartment.
Wow.
All of a sudden, everybody's scrambling around trying to tell Tyler's story, how wonderful of a guy he was, how great of a teammate he was. And that just shook me to my inner core right then and there. And I woke up the next morning after Tyler took his life, and I said, hey, I've got to hang in there. I want to be around to tell my story. I don't want everybody running around all of a sudden trying to tell my story. And that's really what started shaking me out of the dark, deep, depressing thoughts and life that I was in, was when Tyler did that to himself. And so I woke up with a newfound mission in life to be a spokesperson and an advocate for mental health awareness. I still had some work to do and still kept on plugging away the next 2 or 3 or 4 months. But now I feel like I'm finally well on the other side of all of this. But even a couple of days ago, I was posting on Facebook that, hey, I was having one of those down and depressing days and just feeling really blah. And I went and visited an elderly friend of mine at an assisted living home. And it made all the difference in the world for me to be with him, to share my story with him. It lifted my spirit. It lifted his spirit. And that's what we need to do, continue reaching out to each other.
So, James, we're going to go to commercial. We're with James Donaldson, former NBA center and advocate for mental health. I'm Mark Altman. This is ICommunicate, Finding Your Voice, and we'll be back right after the break. Okay, welcome back to the show, everybody. I'm with my guest, James Donaldson. And, James, I want to pick up where we left off, and I want to talk about when you reached that crisis point and the unfortunate situation happened at Washington State with that young man. I want to ask you, were there times prior to 2017, did you have an understanding what mental health issues even were? And were there steps that you've looked back on that you wish you would have taken before it had actually reached that crisis point?
Yeah, good question. You know, I think one of the things that came about with me going through what I went through was a much, much greater sense of empathy and a capacity for empathy than ever before. I never really have been around mental health illness throughout my growing up years, and you know, I've always had a few crazy teammates here and there, but I never considered them mentally ill, and never really saw any of that in my family that I know of. So I really didn't quite understand when people talked about depression. Girlfriends and relationships over the years, when the girlfriend would try to share her thoughts with me about what she was going through, her feelings, her emotions, I never really was able to be that empathetic and really understand. But now I am. I mean, this really did a 180 for me and put me on a pathway to understanding and being open to listening and talking to everybody and anybody who's gone through anything, because it's real. Even if it's not real to me, it's real to them. And we all deserve the opportunity to have somebody in our lives that we could sit down and we can just be real with and say, hey, I'm really struggling with this, or, you know, this bothers me and I need somebody to understand that. So that's where I am now. And that's the big change that came about with me over the last year or so. This is similar to, I had open heart surgery back about 3.5 years ago.
Wow.
Unexpectedly. I had a aortic dissection that was developing rapidly and almost burst on me. This would have been 98, 99% fatal if it did burst. And the doctors caught it just in time. I underwent a emergency 12-hour open heart surgery. I've got the full length zipper on my rib cage to prove it. And I stayed in the intensive care unit for 2.5 months, and I woke up 2 weeks later. 2 weeks later after surgery. They put me in a medically induced coma so I could recover, hopefully. When I went through all of that, that is when I really said, wow, life is precious. I've always enjoyed life. I've always cherished life and my friends and relationships. But this put it up a whole new level, tenfold, 100-fold more of how important my friends were to me, my relationships, my loved ones. I went around the next couple of years telling everybody I met, hey, I love you, and, you're important to me. And I just really cherish life at that point and still do. And then this latest bout of depression and anxiety really brought the empathetic part into what others are going through and what I'm going through as well.
So James, I want to ask you a two-part question. So I'll just start with the beginning. So I want you to rewind back to your playing days for a moment and picture yourself in the Mavericks locker room. And you're sitting there possibly feeling depressed, possibly feeling anxious. You or another teammate. Can you imagine? So part one of the question is, can you imagine going to Coach Mata and actually sharing that and professing that, part one? And part two, one of the biggest challenges, I think, for athletes or anybody else for that matter, is how do you know the difference between what is disappointment, lower level depression, or maybe the kind of depression or anxiety that could lead to some pretty significant mental health issues?
That's a really good question. First of all, I don't think I would have, Dick Mata and I are dear friends now, 30 years later. But then he was such a stern taskmaster and a disciplinarian, a father figure that I probably would not dare to have opened up to him and talked to him about anything personal. Now, this is what assistant coaches are for. Assistant coaches are in that in-between bridge that you usually feel a little more comfortable with, a little more confiding in. I had a wonderful assistant coach, big man coach, Clifford Ray.
Yep.
Clifford was, yeah. You remember Clifford?
I do.
The Golden State Warriors,
yep.
1975.
Very much.
Champion.
Mm-hmm.
Clifford was my big man coach with me and Roy Tarpley and Bill Winnington and Uwe Blob and all these guys. And Clifford became a dear, dear friend. He was my confidant. I could talk to him about anything because he had been there, he had done that. And he knew the pressures of playing in the NBA, the lifestyles that we were leading and having to stay on top of. So I most likely would not have gone to my head coach. And this is what I'm encouraging all of our young athletes and student athletes to do. If you don't feel comfortable going to your head coach, make sure you find an assistant coach or someone who's instrumental in the team and on the team that you can sit down and confide in. And then that will work its way up the chain eventually to the people who can really help you. But it's important to talk. And us competitive athletes, we tend to tuck all of that inside of us, just grunt through it, and keep on pushing. But it's so detrimental to overall what we need to do. The second part of your question was, I'm sorry, Mark.
Yeah, no problem. The second part of the question was, what's the internal checklist? How does an athlete or anybody else for that matter, if they're going to ask themselves 2 or 3 questions to say, wait, is this just standard normal emotion that everybody feels, or wait, have I gone a level above that? What are the questions they should be asking themselves?
Well, I think when you find these issues, these burdens being carried onto the practice court, being carried into the game, you're still thinking about them, you're still weighed down by them. I mean, all of us have family issues going on, family dynamics, sending money to people to help them with their bills, their support, whatever. You can't get away from it. The only safe sanctuary is actually in the practice court or in the game. But if you find yourself carrying that over into a practice court or to the game, these issues have become larger than what you probably can handle. And that's what the players need to really be on guard for. It's okay to think about it between games, between practice, but, we train ourselves to block everything out. We're in this vacuum of professional sports, collegiate sports, for those couple of hours in practice every day. Nothing else can touch us. Nothing else can bother us because we're focused on practice. The same with the games. But if you can't focus on practice, you can't focus on the game, you've got an issue, and you really need to reach out and get some help for that.
Yeah, and James, my daughter Kyra, who taught me an expression about almost like an assessment, and she said if your feelings or emotions affect your ability to live, laugh, or love, that's kind of a message to know you might have an issue, and I thought that was pretty meaningful.
I like that. Wow, that's great. No, she's a wonderful gal, and that's a wonderful step. I'm going to steal that from her. And use it myself.
That's great. That's great. So, James, one of the areas you're very passionate about that connected with me or resonated with me as well, is men and boys being able to express their emotions. And I have a parenting workshop I do for companies and individuals. It's called Mixed Emotions, and how men and boys express their feelings. So I'd like to talk about that a little bit. And for you personally, what are you seeing? I think there's obvious things in terms of the stigma and how men and women are raised and the different expectations and so on and so forth. But it's to me, again, the mental health issue, if you're internalizing things and if you don't have that support system, just talk about the consequences and how you're trying to help in that area.
Yeah, that really is my primary focus, is working with young men and boys and men in general, that we all need to be able to put our guard down, find somebody we can confide in, and talk to them on a level that's below the surface. We're all good at the surfacey stuff, a little, hey, what's up kind of thing. But we need to get below that and just pull somebody aside and really reach out and connect with them. This is one of the detriments of living in this technological age that we're living in. All the kids have cell phones. They all have iPads and PCs and everything else. And they are much more comfortable with their technology in the palm of their hand than they are sitting across the table making a deep and personal, meaningful relationship with someone. And it's unfortunate because, I remember as a boy growing up, riding my little bicycle with my other friends, the guys in the neighborhood, and we'd go down to, a creek bed and sit up there on the bank and just look up into the sky and see the clouds form and dream about what we wanted to be, dream about, what life is going to be like. I don't think kids get a chance to do that much anymore.
Nope.
And it's going to be extremely difficult when it's time to start forming deep and personal, meaningful relationships with a life partner. Can you imagine? I mean, they have to sit down with a girl, or a girl has to sit down with a boy, and they have to put down their text messaging and their cell phones and just say, "Hey, let me talk and try to connect."
Yep.
I don't know how they're going to do that. So that's the big challenge out there, and that's really where my emphasis is especially with the boys, to say, "Hey, guys, you've got to, don't be so tough." I went to a school last week and spoke to a group of at-risk kids, and they were all African-American boys. And they had some of the toughest looks on their faces, some of the crossed arms, staring me down kind of looks. And I'm just like, hey, guys, you've got to be able to open up and relax. I mean, in this environment with me, you can definitely relax. Out there in the hallway, you might be tough again, but you've got to be able to reach out and help each other.
Dale, so we're going to go to commercial, and we're going to continue when we come back after the break with James Donaldson, and we're going to talk about the decision to advocate for yourself. I'm Mark Altman. We'll be right back. Okay, James, we're back, and I want to pick up where we left off again. And James, last week we had a recently retired Major League Baseball umpire, Dale Scott, on. He was the first openly gay umpire. And one of the questions I asked him was, when someone's coming out as gay, they have to make a decision, right? By internalizing it and not being able to live their identity and who they want to be, they're making a unilateral decision to say that would be better than coming out. So when it comes to mental health and advocating for yourself, it's a very similar situation. The stigma that you might have to deal with as a man or as a human to share your feelings and talk about your struggles and seek that support and accountability. How do you, James, if you had a young person come to you and ask you how you would approach that decision of what's worse. What is your thought? What are your thoughts around that, and how do you advise kids in that area?
Yeah, it's really a tough decision, and it's something that people struggle with internally for quite some time. But I think, the choice is living a life in misery and not really being who you are, but you're projecting this persona on the outside, or really trying to, consolidate those things and really be true to yourself and who you are and how you feel. You have to risk that not everyone is going to approve of what you are talking about or who you've become or who you always have been. And you have to risk that, but the people who fall away because they don't understand or they're not supportive, they're not empathetic enough, you really don't need those people in your life anyway. They can come back when they see that, maybe they feel a little more comfortable. Maybe they've had some personal growth as well. They'll come back then. But my encouragement to anybody that's struggling with any kind of internal, dilemmas, whether it's coming out or whether it's talking about mental health, is find the courage. And again, this really comes from finding the confidence, someone who can not judge you, who can just say, "Hey, I really accept you for you and who you are and what you've been through," and continue to build your courage with that person or persons. I just blogged something the other day about, getting through mental health by forming a peer group. Having a group of support is very important. So that's what I would encourage everyone to do. And it may take a short time. It may take years and years or decades and decades. But the longer you internalize it, the longer you keep it a secret to yourself, I think the less quality of life you'll be able to enjoy. And so that's my encouragement to everyone.
Yeah, and James, one of my passions is around something I call conversation intelligence. And what I specifically mean by that is there are so many barriers to feeling comfortable sharing information. And just to go over a couple very quickly, so let's say you have a high school, college student, young adult who feels like they're ready to talk. Okay, so they're willing, they're able, they've overcome any fears they have around it. Even if they get to those points, how to have that conversation is very difficult for people. Who to actually have it with without being judged is very difficult. And I think one of the major things I'm trying to solve and ideally hopefully work with you a little bit on is how to get people armed with the tools and strategies to know how to have those conversations. Yeah,
I see. One of the best things I did, Mark, was when I was really in the depths of my despair, I not only reached out to my medical professionals, but I also reached out to a small, intimate group of friends, of people who've known me for 30 or 40 years. They know James, for all these years. They know how I normally am, how I normally act, and they could definitely see that I was really going through something and was really troubled. I purposely pulled together a group of men about my age who had known me, some businessmen, a couple of my old coaches, Coach Lenny Wilkins, Coach George Raveling. They had known me from my rookie days in the NBA, and George when I was at WSU. Some personal friends who had been through some business ups and business failures. And all these guys came together. There was about 7 or 8 of them. And I asked each and every one of them, I said, "Hey, if I need someone to call at 1:30 or 2 in the morning, can I call you?" And they immediately put their hands up and said, "Yes, put us on speed dial, call us anytime." And I mentioned to them also that, "Hey, I need you to call me once or twice a week just to check in on me. Not to want anything from me, but just to check and see how I'm feeling. Am I being overwhelmed by anything? Do I have any thoughts about suicide? Check on me, please." And they did that for months and months. And so that's really how I was able to get through what I was going through. None of them judged me. All of them have been dear friends. Matter of fact, several of them shared their own personal struggles that they were going through over the years, and I had no idea, which is the tendency that we typically have. We have no idea what people are going through.
Definitely.
And so, yeah, and even a couple of days ago when I posted a photo of myself and my old athletic trainer from the Sonics, I had a nice big smile on my face, but behind that smile, I was depressed, I was dreary, I was hurting, but I had a smile on my face in front of my friend for the camera. See? And I explained to folks, I said, hey, even if you see a smile on my face, this was one of the worst days I've had in a long time. And I need you guys to be there with me and for me and to be supportive and helpful and non-judgmental. And I'd say 99% of the folks that I communicate with have been exactly that. And I've built an online community of a lot of folks who are following my pathway through this mental illness, mental challenge. And it's surprising how many of them share their own individual stories with me, that they've gone through a similar thing.
Well, and James, I think your advice is phenomenal because there's a technique I refer to as the elephant in the room technique. And what that is if you're going to share something or talk to someone about something, or if you're fearful someone's thinking something, the best way to do it is just to call it out and deal with the elephant in the room. And what you did in reaching out to those people, asking and advocating for yourself, asking if they could do that and asking if they would support you. If you're worried you're a burden, or if you're worried people aren't going to be there for you, just address it so you don't have to stress and think about it. I think that's tremendous advice.
That's right. And, not to be sexist by any means, but I purposely rounded up a group of men. Now, I had a lot of individual women in my life also who would check in on me on occasion, but I found that they typically had a couple different strategies in mind. The guys would put together a game plan, and they'd say, okay, this is what we need to do to get out of this. Let's go out and execute our play. The women would come in with a lot of empathy and sympathy and, quotes and prayers and all those nice things that made me feel better. But I really needed something at that time to get me through what I was going through. Herbal teas and scented candles and baked cookies and goods. Those were all wonderful, and they were all welcome. I put together the guy group because I knew the guys, especially my old coaches, would put together a game plan to help me get through this thing.
Well, that's tremendous. And I think, one of the things in talking to a lot of men, especially professionally, that I find is if I ask the question, do you have someone outside a family member to go to and confide in as a support? And I'd say maybe half of the men typically answer yes. But it's the second question it blows me away is, but do you actually do it? Do you actually utilize them for support? And James, honestly, it's maybe 10% of men have someone and actually utilize them for that reason.
That's right. I was watching a short video on YouTube the other day about the same thing. And even though the guys were starting to feel more comfortable speaking out and letting folks know, and they acknowledged they had a group of friends or somebody they can confide in, the next question was, but would I? See?
Right.
And that's what you have to be able to answer and feel comfortable with and move forward with.
So, James, we're going to go to our last commercial and come back for one more segment. And when we come back from the break, I'd like to talk about some of the initiatives you're working on and would like to put you as king for a day and have if you had a magic wand and some solutions you would put in place. So hang on, and we will be back with ICommunicate right after the break. Welcome back to everybody to ICommunicate, Finding Your Voice, here with my guest, James Donaldson. Today, 15 years in the NBA, 5 teams, and was on the Harlem Globetrotters. James, real quick, before we get to our matter at hand, what was it like playing for the Globetrotters, by the way?
That was quite a treat. After 15 years in the NBA, of being very serious and very determined and very, businesslike, all of a sudden I'm out there with the Globetrotters for 2 or 3 months, and I'm traveling around the country day to day to different little cities, and we're putting on an entertainment show. We're doing the ball behind the back, between the legs kind of thing. We're doing all the little choreographed, layup lines and things. It was fun. But people realize how hard those guys actually work, though. I mean, practice every day, travel every day, usually by bus. to a town 2 or 3 hours down the road. This is a grueling lifestyle. I take my hats off to guys who did it forever, like Meadowlark Lemon and Goose Tatum, Curly Neal, and all those guys who really were the forefronters of all that. But it was a lot of fun.
No question. So, James, I want to talk about some of the initiatives you're doing. I know you're in the process of building your nonprofit foundation to work on mental health. I want to talk about what you're doing overseas in China in your after-school program and what prompted you to work overseas and specifically in China with these kids?
Well, about 2010, I took a trip over to China for the first time with Charles Smith, a former NBA player who was a teammate of mine. And we went over there on behalf of the NBA Retired Players Association. Charles was the executive director at the time. I was the board director. And we both went over there knowing and understanding that the new land of opportunities for basketball was going to be in China. China was just basketball crazy. Yao Ming was still, going strong and wrapping up his career or in the midst of his great career. They were watching NBA games in 2 or 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, broadcast over to China. And so Charles and I went over there and we said, hey, this really is a great place for us to get opportunities for the retired NBA players. Camps, clinics, teaching opportunities, player appearances, autograph sessions, all kinds of things. So that's what Charles and I did. I got involved with the educational piece because sports and education and youth programs all kind of naturally overlap each other. And so while I was doing the basketball piece, I started meeting a lot of educators who knew I was well connected with quite a few colleges and universities here in the United States. And we started talking about study abroad programs for the Chinese students, how they help more and more students come here to study at the university levels. And so that's something I've been doing for quite a while. The after-school programs are basically based in China, where we go to the schools and we do a little bit of basketball training, maybe a little bit of English teaching in the classroom, cultural insightness classes of what life in America is all about. And these kids are just thirsty for this information. They see it on TV, they get some of it through the internet, but to meet a real live American who can come and talk to them and be palling around with them for a while is a treat that they never ever forget.
So, James, I'm going to ask you I'm going to put you on the spot in a good way, 2 really difficult questions here before we wrap up. So, first, let's look at the NBA. So, let's say that money is no object. You have a magic wand, and you could make a change in the NBA to make it more comfortable for players to advocate for themselves, to put more of a focus and emphasis on resiliency. What is something, if money were no object and you were given the power, you would do right away?
Right away, I would utilize the retired NBA players as a personal mentor for each and every current NBA player. Match them up according to their personalities or characters, what have you. Because the retired NBA guys, we've been there and we've done that. We know what the life is like during our playing days and after our playing days. And that would really help our young players be much, much better prepared for life after the game. So many of them are not prepared. So many of the retired players were not prepared. But they find out quickly that life is a real grind out there. And once the spotlight is off you, you're a regular working Joe again, and you've got to really be able to handle yourself and manage the monies that you made during your NBA career.
So, James, No, go ahead.
I was going to say, these young players coming out now, they may have a nest egg of $40 or $50 million. But, they're 28, 29 years old, their career is over, now what? And so that's the big question to help them with that transition.
So what stands in the way? I mean, is it a money thing? Is it resistance from the current players? Is it a combination of both or other things? What stands in the way? Because it's obviously a great idea. So what's preventing it?
Well, I think the NBA, like any major corporation in America, is just that, a big business, big corporation. They don't want a real educated workforce. They want guys.
That's great. Oh,
I'm
boy.
serious. They don't, because all of a sudden, if you educate the guys, I was just watching the historical piece the other day on Kurt Flood and Oscar Robertson, and Jim Brown, and these guys who really in the '60s were starting to fight for players' rights and better contracts. And they educated a lot of people that, hey, you're being taken advantage of, so you have to be able to have something to push back on. So the NBA is no different. The NFL is no different. They don't want an educated workforce. They want guys who are young, dumb, don't ask questions, take the money, don't give them any problems. But if you educate them, they'll start asking questions. They'll start carving out a better leverage position for themselves. And that's what us retired guys can help those young guys with, because we've been through all of this.
So, James, and same question, at the high school and college level, you're king for a day, you've got a magic wand, money's no object. What do our educational institutions, what could we do immediately for resiliency and mental health in that regard?
Well, I think, supplying and having available greater mentor resources or mental health resources would be the first step. We all talk about it. We all act like we have a great program ready to handle. I just heard from a parent from WSU, Washington State University, my alma mater, a couple of days ago. Her son attempted suicide over the last weekend on the campus of Washington State University. The son reached out for mental health resources. They had a waiting line of 4 months before they can even get in and see someone to talk to them. And that's just unacceptable. This is a kid who's ready to kill themselves, and you've got a 4-month waiting period? Please. So this is the kind of thing, a lot of these institutions talk about all the great work they're doing, but in reality, they're coming up woefully short, and we have to be able to do a better job with that. So this is my new mission, is to go around and be a voice, be an advocate, speak all over the country to groups, to students, to student athletes about mental health and how they can handle themselves in a better way, a different way, and work their way through it.
And James, before I get to my last question, just want to ask, for people who want to support what you're doing for your foundation, what is the best way for them to reach out? What can they be doing? What would you suggest?
Well, I'm all over social media, so you can easily find my social Facebook pages on James Donaldson. Just go ahead and search for that, or on Twitter with Team Donaldson. I have a Twitter handle, Team Donaldson. I've got a 1-800 toll-free number people can call, and we can discuss. We can leave a voicemail. I'll get right back to you. That is 800-745-3161. Okay, 800-745-3161. And I'll be more than happy to discuss. I'm getting into more of the life coaching aspect of this as well. A lot of folks who just need somebody to talk to, somebody to understand what they're going through. And I want to make myself available for that kind of thing as well. But just reach out any of those variety of ways, and I will shoot an email back to you and we'll get the ball rolling and really make sure that you're on track to work through anything that you're going through.
All right, James, last question, fun question, two-part question. In your playing days, who was your favorite player to play against? And now, who is your favorite player to watch? And I don't mean from like a highlights perspective. I mean from you value their work ethic. There's something that really you connect with. So what are your thoughts on those two?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I had a favorite player to play against. They were all difficult and hard. People ask me that a lot, though, and I'd say the most difficult player for me to play against, being a big guy like I was against Moses Malone. Moses was just a workhorse. He was not flashy and dashy, and he would just wear you out and beat you to death down there with that energy he had. Along came a new and improved version of Moses Malone, and that was Hakeem Olajuwon, who was just as difficult to guard as Moses was. But the most unstoppable player ever for me was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Wow.
No matter how high you jumped to try to block that sky hook, by the time you landed on the ground and you turned your head to look, and it's just nestling its way through the net, each and every time. It was so hard to guard Kareem. But, of course, I played against the great ones. Michael Jordan was always exciting to play against him and his team. Larry Bird, Charles Barkley, Dr. J, all of these great players.
So James, thank you. That's very interesting. And so we're going to wrap up. James Donaldson, thank you so much. Looking forward to working with you and helping your foundation and collaborating, and really appreciate you taking so much time today. So thank you very much. James Donaldson, former NBA center for the Dallas Mavericks, advocate of all ages for mental health. And thank you for joining us for ICommunicate, Finding Your Voice. We'll see you same time next week. Have a great afternoon. Go Sox!